Hello, and welcome to Historical Fiction with Kviatoslav. I've spoken before about why I think that 20th century historical fiction is much better than modern historical fiction, and I wanted to provide some examples of, I think, 20th century historical fiction writers who are less well known, or at least not as well known as they should be. And I wanted to start with one of my favorite authors, a gentleman called Alfred Duggan, who I consider really probably almost criminally underrated in terms of his the lack of knowledge about his writings, because I really feel that he was one of the best writers of historical fiction of the 20th century. He was an Argentinian-born British author, and he wrote in the 50s and 60s. And he wrote 15 novels altogether, which I think one per year up until his death. And I've read all of them, and I like all of them, some of them better than others, obviously. But I really wanted to draw some attention to him because luckily many of his books have been reprinted over the years, particularly by the ones like these Cassell Military Classics and a few other publishers who realized that Duggan should be shared with more people there. And I was really wondering what book to start with. Duggan had, I would say, three particularly interesting periods in his writings. He really liked to write about the Roman Empire, about Anglo-Saxon Britain, and about the Normans and the Crusades. So I just decided to start with actually the first book that I read by Alfred Duggan, which is also the first book that he ever wrote, which was published in 1950 there, which is called Knight with Armour, which is probably still one of my, if not my favorite books by Duggan. And I reread it recently, and I was wondering how it would hold up on a rereading. And I'm happy to say it's still just as excellent as when I first read it. It was his first published novel dealing with the First Crusade from kind of a Norman perspective. It does cover some of the territory that his last final novel, Count Boheme, covered, but I feel like this one is superior to that final novel. The main character in this one is a young knight called Roger de Bonham. There, he's a younger son of a minor noble lord who attaches himself to the Duke of Normandy, Robert Curthose. Roger's position as a young noble gives us a really great perspective in that he's able to mix with at least one of the leaders of the crusade, as well as the common folk during the march, giving us a much more personal perspective than Count Bohemon's there. And if you don't know anything about the First Crusade, this is a great introduction to it, which is probably one of the most fantastic undertakings in human history. And this one is full of fantastic details there. You meet a number of characters who each represent the varied motives for European crusaders. But the true strength is actually the main character, Roger. He's basically a relatively nice guy. You know, you can't help but be drawn into the ups and downs throughout the tale. He makes some bad decisions and some good decisions, and it's really interesting to see the way that his fortunes rise and fall throughout the march there. I don't think any other novel, except for perhaps Zoe Oldenburg's Heirs of the Kingdom, which brings home the true feeling of the absolute misery that what the Crusades must have been like in this novel. Duggan really does not sugarcoat any of the journey there, and you get the full trauma of what it must have been like there. Still, it's a fun read. I'm not saying it's a depressing or sad read or anything like that. It just really is a realistic approach there. I won't really say more about the novel because it has plenty of surprises, and it probably has the single best ending of any historical fiction book that I've ever read. So I still find this to be one of, if not the best, of Duggan's novel, and just a fantastic novel on crusading in general. Thanks for your time.